James E. Tedford was 68 years old on December 1st, 1949, and on that day he boarded a bus in Vermont bound for Bennington. He was seen during the ride by other passengers. He was seen sleeping in his seat at the last stop before the terminal. The bus did not make any other stops, but by the time it pulled into the station, James Tedford was gone. His luggage remained in the rack above his seat. An open bus timetable sat on the empty cushion. 15 people had seen him. None of them saw him leave. This is the detail that breaks expectation. The bus kept moving. There were no doors opening in the dark. No commotion, no sign of struggle. Just a man present at one moment and absent at the next, inside a vehicle that never stopped. The question this video will leave open is simpler than most retellings admit. Did James Tedford really vanish from a moving bus? Or did the story begin somewhere else entirely? The line between fact and folklore here is thinner than most accounts admit. If you want to stay on this case as we pull apart the layers of the Bennington Triangle, follow the file, the next turn you might not expect, and in the comments, type "the file stays open" if you think the bus itself might be the least reliable witness in this story. You have probably heard the name James Tedford before, grouped with the Bennington Triangle disappearances in southwestern Vermont. The term Bennington Triangle itself was coined by a man named Joseph A. Citro, an author who wrote about the cluster of vanishings around Glastonbury Mountain and the surrounding towns of Bennington, Woodford, Shaftesbury, and Somerset. It is one of those phrases that sounds ancient, like something whispered in town records for centuries. But it was not. It was invented in a book. The common narrative goes like this. Tedford was a resident of the Bennington Soldiers' Home. He had been visiting relatives in St. Albans, a town north of the Triangle, and boarded a southbound bus to return. The weather was heavy with winter snow. The route was delayed. A friend spoke with him during a transfer at the Burlington depot around 6:15 p.m. Tedford got on the Bennington bus. He was tired. He settled into a seat near the back. At some point between the last stop before Bennington and the station itself, he was gone. The bus had not pulled over. The driver had not opened the door. The other passengers, according to later retellings, had seen him sleeping earlier. His body was not found. His belongings were still aboard. This is the version that circulates in articles, podcasts, and folklore. But here is what most retellings leave out. When you start looking for the original police reports from 1949, something does not line up. The file was not opened until a week after the ride. The superintendent of the Bennington Soldiers' Home notified authorities on December 8th. By then, the bus had been cleaned. The passengers had scattered. The trail was not just cold, it was frozen. The precise sequence of events on that bus is known only from secondary accounts. No primary document from the day of the disappearance has surfaced in the supplied records. This is not a case with crisp evidence. It is a story held together by memory. According to the modern retellings that have shaped this mystery, Tedford was observed by 14 passengers and the driver at the final stop before Bennington. He was asleep. It was a cold, dark evening. The windows were fogged with condensation. The bus was warm and cramped. The mood was ordinary. Then the bus moved again. One retelling states that at some point during the final leg of the journey, Tedford was no longer in his seat. The driver did not notice. The passengers did not notice. Nobody reported hearing the door open. Nobody saw a figure step into the snow. When the bus arrived at the Bennington station and the travelers began to gather their things, Tedford's luggage was still in the overhead rack. His open timetable sat on the empty seat. At first, there was confusion. A head count, a check of the bathroom, a question to the driver. Where is the old man? No one could answer. But here is the part that is rarely said clearly. The claim that Tedford vanished from a moving bus is a popular retelling. It is the version that makes the story impossible. It is also unverified. The supplied records do not include a primary source proving the bus was literally in motion at the moment of disappearance. The phrase "moving bus" is compelling. It suggests a vanishing that defies physics. but the factual spine of the case does not support that precise detail with archival weight. Similarly, the claim that 15 witnesses saw him vanish is not verified by the supplied results. It should not be stated as fact. The witnesses saw him before he was gone. They did not see him go. At this point, the investigation takes a turn most people never hear about. The police interviewed the driver and the passengers. Every account was the same. They had seen him. Then they had not. But there was no moment of disappearance. No theatrical event, no flash of light, no cry. Simply an absence that became apparent only when the bus had stopped. This is the first crack in the neat story. The mystery is not that a man vanished from a moving vehicle in front of 15 witnesses. The mystery is that no one noticed he was gone until the journey was already over. That kind of absence does not announce itself. That unnoticed absence is the real puzzle, not how he vanished, but why no one saw the gap. If you want to follow the file through the contradictions that follow, stay on this case with us. Drop a comment with the phrase, "missed in plain sight," if you've ever wondered how many disappearances start with a simple failure to look back. The contradictions begin to accumulate. The claim that Tedford disappeared exactly 3 years to the day after Paula Weldon is a repeated narrative element. It lends the Bennington Triangle a sense of pattern, of ritual timing, but the supplied results do not verify that date pairing from a primary source. It is a coincidence built into the storytelling, not into the case file. The number of Bennington Triangle cases varies widely depending on which source you consult. Some include 5, others include 8 or 10. The boundaries of the triangle shift. Glastonbury Mountain stays at the center, but the edges blur, and the term Bennington Triangle itself was not used until decades after the disappearances. Joseph A. Citro published it in the early 1990s, long after Tedford, Weldon, and the others had faded from front-page memory. The name gives the case's gravity. It also creates a container that may not have existed at the time. These contradictions point to a reality more complicated than the neat story. The official version, if it can be called official, is a fragment. There is no definitive solution. We cannot say where James Tedford went. We cannot say why, only that he was on a bus in Vermont on December 1st, 1949, heading toward Bennington, and that when the bus arrived, he was not. The open timetable on his empty seat is the detail that lingers. It suggests something. A man checking his next connection. A man planning a departure. Or simply a man who fell asleep with the page open and left it behind when he stood up for the last time. We do not know which version is true. The record is silent on the timetable, but the image remains. Some reports suggest that a man matching Tedford's description was seen behaving strangely in Brandon, a town about 70 miles north of Bennington, in the days after the disappearance. This has been offered as a possible sighting, a possible clue that he had not vanished at all, but had simply left the bus at an earlier point, unnoticed, and begun a different journey. If Tedford did leave the bus in Brandon, it would explain why his belongings were still aboard. He might have intended to return. He might have been confused. He might have stepped off into the storm and never found his way back. But the sighting in Brandon is not confirmed. It remains a theory, an echo. And then there is the shadow in Tedford's own life. His wife, Pearl, had disappeared years before, after he returned from the First World War. She was 28 years old when she vanished without trace. Tedford carried that loss into the veteran's home, into the ordinary routines of his later years. Some accounts suggest he suffered from severe depression. Some say he told people he never intended to return to Bennington. Whether that is a statement of suicidal intention or a desire to disappear voluntarily is unclear. What is clear is that James Tedford vanished in a place where other people had vanished. Paula Weldon, a 19-year-old college student, disappeared on December 1st, 1946, exactly 3 years to the day before Tedford's own disappearance, although this date pairing is not verified by primary sources. Mitty Rivers, an experienced hunter, disappeared in the same area earlier. The pattern, real or coincidental, seems to repeat. You might have assumed this case was solved, It is not. The file remains open. How many missing persons cases slip through the cracks because we accept easy narratives? A man on a bus. A dozen witnesses. A sudden absence. The story feels complete. The missing element is the evidence. The bus kept moving. He did not get off. But the question is not where he went. The question is why we still search. We search because the open timetable suggests a man who was still planning his next move. We search because the belongings left behind suggest he did not intend to abandon his life. We search because a moving bus is a closed system, and in a closed system, a man should not simply cease to exist. But if he did not cease to exist, and if he left the bus voluntarily, then the closed system was never closed. The door opened, he stepped out, and no one noticed. That explanation is the most rational one. It is also the most uncomfortable, because it means James Tedford could disappear in plain sight, not through magic, but through the simple failure of attention. The Bennington Triangle draws us in with the supernatural. The pattern of anniversaries, the impossible vanishings, the term itself, which sounds like a curse on the landscape. But the truth may be more human than that. A man in grief. A winter storm. A bus driver who did not look back. The most unsettling possibility is that James Tedford disappeared not because of a curse, but because no one looked hard enough. As we close this case, if you want to stay on this case for the next disappearance that challenges easy narratives, follow the file. And in the comments, write ordinary failure if you think the mundane explanation is harder to accept than the supernatural. The area centered on Glastonbury Mountain is beautiful and remote. The towns that surround it, Bennington, Woodford, Shaftesbury, Somerset, are small and quiet. When snow falls there, the roads disappear. A man stepping off a bus into that landscape might never be found. But stepping off a bus is not the same as vanishing from one. The distinction matters. What happened to James Tedford? The bus arrived at Bennington. He did not. His belongings were still in the seat. An open timetable suggested he was still paying attention to his route, but where he went, and how he left without anyone noticing, remains one of Vermont's deepest mysteries. The silence left behind, that ordinary absence on a winter evening, that empty seat, that unread schedule, still waits for an answer. The files remain open, and the bus keeps moving.